Pastor Brian here, CEO of Family Policy Institute of Washington, and welcome to Defender Grassroots. We have another Constitution where we are going to begin to discuss with Rick Lynch about his book, Money and Liberty. It's going to be a great day of just diving into our Constitution and thoughts about money today. So we're going to talk about that, and we're also going to maybe bring up a little bit, how did the Bill of Rights actually end up in the Constitution? So Rick, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So just in case someone didn't listen to the last episode, just give us a brief synopsis of where we were, and then let's go into our new question for today.
Last time we talked, it was we covered two important points. The fact that the framers thought that the Bill of Rights was a very bad idea, and they refused to put the Bill of Rights into the Constitution. And in a 10-second overview, very, very simply, why was the Bill of Rights a bad idea? Well, the framers said repeatedly, if you list a few rights, or 10 or 20 or 100, whatever, if you list certain rights, those will be the only rights that you have at the end of the day.
Right.
And the framers knew we had way more rights than that tiny little list that I call the Bill of Very Few Rights. And they were correct, of course. Again, 10 seconds. I don't think anybody would argue with me that today the federal government believes it is entitled to legislate on any topic whatsoever at any time, period, no matter what, as long as it does not offend the Bill of Rights.
Rick, you got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me. They don't ever overextend their reach. I mean,
no, my wife said, I mentioned this too many times, but I'll mention it again. They think that they can send my money to journalists in Sri Lanka to teach them not to offend certain people with their writings. That's how big their reach is now. And if they can do that, by God, they can do anything.
Right. And so what you're emphasizing, which is really accurate, that they originally had the concept, and this is what you taught me last time, the concept that they were going to limit government and then everything else was going to be acceptable. Did I get that right? Did I grow on that? Yeah.
The framers thought the Bill of Rights was a wonderful idea in reverse.
Right.
The framers said, we're not going to make a tiny little list of your rights. We are going to make a tiny little list of government powers, federal government powers. We need to be clear about that. Federal government powers. Anything not on that tiny little list is retained by you, the people. That was their strategy. And before the Bill of Rights, you had every single right listed in the Bill of Rights, every single one, plus a billion others.
Right.
The federal government had, 20 powers, and that's it. Now, you've got only the Bill of Rights, and the federal government has a billion powers.
Right.
It's nothing. If you wanted to destroy the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights is certainly the best way to do it. It flipped the Constitution on its head.
Right.
So
and it's important to listen to that in context, just so because we know we live in a soundbite world. In no way are they saying the Bill of Rights. They were against some aspect of the Bill of Rights. They were against limiting to those rights. And they also said that the rights came from God, which are really important to keep.
Yeah. There are natural rights and there are civil rights. Natural rights are the big important ones, and they come from God. But yes, I always have to make clear, every single right listed in the Bill of Rights, the framers believed in passionately. They were passionate devotees of freedom of speech and freedom of press and freedom of religion. Passionate, but again, if you list those rights, that's the only ones you're going to have.
Right.
So, and that's exactly the situation we find ourselves in today. And it's amazing how many intellectuals out there. It's amazing how many of them will say, well, the Bill of Rights, they'll get it half right. Hamilton said the Bill of Rights is unnecessary and dangerous. They get the unnecessary part right. They'll say, it's a good thing we have. I can see why it was unnecessary, but it's a good thing we have it because at least we have these rights now. And look at that enumeration thing where we list the government powers. That doctrine has just been gutted and no one pays attention to it. And the framers would have said, yeah. And the reason it's been gutted and no one pays attention to it is because of the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights is the thing that makes people believe they have only those rights. The Bill of Rights is the reason the enumeration has vanished and disappeared. It's to me, it's amazing. As I say, it's been amazing me for 30 years. So
Now, you just recently released a new book called Money and Liberty. Hold that up for us. We're kind of low tech here. There you go. Money and Liberty by Rick Lynch, and you can get this on Amazon. You can get this on Kindle, Nook, a lot of different places. Check it out. Please place an order. It really does help Rick out. But you can get this in a number of different places. And tell us about
everywhere.
The idea of money, right?
Well, the subtitle. How the framers' obsession with protecting your money shaped the Constitution. And that was the second thing we talked about. The framers believe that your money, your property that is created by your mind, soul, body, labor, and your hands is a sacred right. The most important of the sacred rights. And as we discussed, they speak of money in starkly religious tones all of the time. The moment the idea, they call it property, and property being money, it's, anything that falls under property. The moment the idea is entered into society that property is not as sacred as the laws of God, anarchy and tyranny commence, said John Adams. At the convention describing America's first welfare program, one of the framers called it as alarming as the mark of the beast in Revelation. And it's nonstop. The sacred, the frankly biblical terminology they use when discussing money. My favorite was, I think it was Madison said that if you create a pure democracy, which the framers clearly did not, if you create a pure democracy and everybody just gets a vote on everything, you will find that your money, and notice again, you could note a billion things that would be threatened by that, but it's always money that they come back to. You will find that your money is as the Lamb committed to the world. Now, that's straight from the Bible. And in the Bible, the Lamb is Jesus. And in Adam's, did I just say Madison? One of those guys. And in Adam's telling, the Lamb is money.
Right.
And you just don't get more, as they say, starkly religious tones is the terminology I'll use. And I got that. I have to be clear about that. Starkly religious tones is the way another author described it, and I wish I could remember who, but those three words are not mine. I have to be clear. Okay. But yes, that's how they viewed money.
So we talked about property and how property tax and just a whole bunch of other things. I'd encourage you, if you haven't checked out that show, to go back. I think it was on the Constitutional Day, right? Wasn't it a Constitutional Celebration Day, or it was like Thursday or something like that? National Celebrate the Constitution. Anyways, I don't know, but go back. I think it was Thursday, if I remember right. We had that episode come out, and I want to encourage you to check that out. So, Rick, today we're going to talk about paper money, and so just take it as I'm completely ignorant to this topic. I mean, I obviously know what paper money is. There's a $20 bill, a $10 bill. I get it, but explain that to me.
I've never met anybody who is aware of this, that the Constitution only came into existence because of the paper money crisis. Paper money was America's first welfare program, plain and simple. And the framers were horrified and disgusted by it, and that's why we have a Constitution. Now, if you've never in your life heard of the paper money crisis, you're probably saying that that's the reason? Yes, I promise you it is. I'm going to back that up in 1 second. Now, the framers had a lot of beef with the Articles of Confederation. That's true. But lacking the critical spark of paper money, there's just no way in the world that the convention would have been called. We would not have a U.S. Constitution. And just again, to back that up, I'll cite two facts. Anti-Federalist Richard Henry Lee, very much opposed to the Constitution, admitted that the reason the convention was called was because of the paper money crisis. Quote from Richard Henry Lee, writing as the federal farmer in the Anti-Federalist essays. Some people actually credit this essay to Melancton Smith, another anti-federalist, but whoever. Several state legislatures, by making paper money laws, have given just cause of uneasiness to creditors. We'll explain that in a second. This abuse of power in the legislatures, which has been charged upon the democratic part of the community, meaning the common man, the poor man, the majority, this abuse of powers, which has been charged upon the democratic part of the community, has prepared many honest men for changes in government which otherwise they would not have thought of. That's what he says about the convention. Then James Madison, my second citation, wrote a treatise called Vices of the Political System of the United States, just before the convention. He's explaining why the convention's being called. what are the vices of our current political system and why are we having this convention? He cited 12 different vices. Paper money was the very first one he cited. And though it was only one of 12, it took up 1,200 of the 3,100 words.
Wow.
In that essay. 1,200 of 31. 3 times the number of words dedicated to the next leading subject. Furthermore, all the other problems, most of the other problems he cited were theoretical things in nature, like right now we would be weak in the face of foreign attack because we're not united, et cetera, et cetera. Well, this is after the revolution. That's the theoretical. That hasn't happened yet. Paper money was all too real.
Wow. Paper
money is the reason the convention was called. And you'll see at the convention, the way it's talked about just further bolsters that. Paper money, you can't get simpler as a welfare scheme. Oh, and by the way, when I say, I'm going to say the word poor people probably a lot, but even that's not really true. And it makes it sound, those cold, heartless framers. The people we're talking about are not poor really in today's sense. They own their own homes. They own their own farms. They're completely self-sufficient people. The framers called them poor. I use the word poor a lot, but they're not really poor, just to make that clear. So the paper money crisis, you got farmers. To this very day, the cycle never ever changes. Farmers rely on a lot of debt. You need to borrow in advance. The framers, they're in debt. It's, farming is hard then and it's hard now. And so I'm a farmer and I go and I borrow $10 in gold coin from a creditor.
Right.
I sign a contract. I'm going to give you back $12 in gold coin. So I don't know where the idea came from, but it's happening all over the country at the time, various states. Rhode Island was really bad. Rhode Island turned itself into a third world country, as a matter of fact, because that's what happens when you flush property rights absolutely down the toilet. You become a third world country, but we'll get to that. The farmer goes to his state legislature and he says, you know what? I don't want to pay this guy back in gold. I want you to print paper money. Okay, you're going to print paper money. It's going to be damn near worthless, but that's cool. That's the point. Then I'm going to pay back my debts with paper money. Now, the legislatures all over the country are going for this for one very obvious reason. In any given state, there are 1,000 farmers and they all vote, and there may be, 3 creditors. We see the problem here. As one delegate said at the convention, talking about why the convention is called, the evils that we experience can all be traced back to, or the problems we experience can all be traced back to an excess of democracy. The state legislatures were too democratic. No bicameral, well, the farmers ruled. They were the most numerous and they ruled. So the legislator prints the paper money. The debtor, that's not the end of the story. It gets much worse. The creditor says, I'm not taking this crap. Oh, well, we'll pass another law. Yes, you will. You have no choice. You have to take it. We'll pass another law. We will suspend debt. Does this sound familiar today? We will suspend debt collection. Okay, bad enough. Oh, here's another law for you. We will simply flat out cancel debt. Rhode Island was canceling debt left and right. That debt doesn't exist. Rhode Island, it took it to the furthest extreme possible. And this is a very telling tale. The last law they wrote said, okay, Farmer John, you take your money. The creditors have fled the state. The creditors flee the state. They leave their homes to avoid this paper money. Now, if you're one of those people who thinks, well, the rich will always take care of themselves and they don't need any special protection, this is a very sobering tale. Things got so bad, all their wealth and all their power were meaningless in the face of unchecked democracy. They fled their homes to avoid the paper money, and still the mob stole from them. The law was Farmer John takes his money, he deposits it in a bank. He takes out an ad in the newspaper saying, I owe Joe $10. I just paid it off at the bank. Debt's canceled. The man fled the state to avoid the worthless paper money, and still he's broke now. That's how bad, that's what paper money was. It was America's first welfare program. It was breathtakingly corrupt. And it is the reason we have the U.S. Constitution. And when you get to the convention, I urge you to read Madison's notes at the convention, because you'll see it. I mean, it's like the Federalist Papers themselves. We talked about the Federalist Papers yesterday or last time. And we noted that in the Federalist Papers, the framers mention money, property, tax, revenue. They mention that 17 times as often more than 17 times as often is the big three rights listed in the Bill of Rights in the
Right.
First Amendment combined. More than 17 times as often. And it's the exact same thing at the convention. And you'll see over and over and over, I'll just read from the book. Proposed legislative schemes, philosophies of representation, and existing political arrangements are all judged, good or bad, almost solely on whether or not they had prevented, would likely lead to, or had already led to the creation of paper money. In other words, every idea that comes up, this is important, from the biggest to the smallest, a delegate says, hey, they tried that in Vermont, and you know what? That killed the paper money program. And everyone's, or they tried that in Virginia, and it led straight to paper money. And they're like, I'm telling you, every single time they're like,
Right.
you know, is this a good idea? They ask whether or not it led to paper money. Even, I'll give you these two. Even the most basic question, like, can the voters be trusted to pick their own representatives to the House chamber, the House representatives? Can they be trusted to do that, or must we rely on the state legislatures to do them for it? Does this lead to paper money or not? When you're even that huge, gigantic question comes down to paper money. And on the other end of the spectrum, how about what constitutes a quorum? Now you've got 100, you got 20 senators.
Right.
How many must be in the chamber before votes are allowed to go forward? Is 2 enough? Do you have to have 18, 10, a quorum? How many of the reps have to be present before the vote goes forward? Even that was subject to the paper money test. I think it was Randolph who stood and said, you know, in Virginia, they require a big number, and that led to paper money being crushed. So I just don't know how many ways to say it. Paper money was the litmus test, the acid test for a huge amount of what is or is not in the Constitution.
Was there a greatest thing? Obviously, you can print more paper money. Obviously, you can, you know.
Well, the states were forbidden from printing paper money.
Okay.
The solution to this, and we talked about this yesterday, and again, in case you missed, I keep saying yesterday. It was not.
We get it. It's fine.
In case you missed it, the solution was in Article 1, Section 10, I think, you find a list of the relatively few things that state governments are not allowed to do. And on that list, you can't print paper money. You cannot make anything but gold or silver a legal tender. You cannot impair contracts. No more ex post facto laws, which is another way of saying you write a law that doubles back on an existing contract and change it. No paper money, no ex post facto laws, no impairing of debt, no canceling of debt. Okay, they fixed it. And here's what's amazing about that. And we talked about this not yesterday. I'm sorry, you may or may not remember. The state governments under the U.S. Constitution retained a great deal of power,
Right.
Here's what they were allowed to do. And when you contrast this with what they're not allowed to do, it's really amazing. I am quoting now from Forrest McDonald and Novus Ordo Seclorum, a great book written in the 80s. And by the way, this absolutely destroys that nonsense about a wall of separation between church and state. It is true. There is a wall of separation between the federal government and church. Absolutely a wall of separation. But there's a wall of separation between the federal government and my wife buying mascara, for that matter. Again, the federal government is empowered to do very little.
Right.
But the state governments, most of the colonies had tax-supported churches. All except Rhode Island imposed legal restrictions on various religious sects, and penalties for dissenters, apostates, blasphemers, and idolaters were numerous and severe. The states could establish the mode and manner of religious worship and instruction, and they could levy taxes for the support of religion. They could stifle dissent, stifle freedom of the press, of speech, of inquiry. They could regulate food, drink, and clothing for moral or religious purposes. They could do, under the U.S. Constitution, they were allowed to do all of that because, as we've noted, the Bill of Rights applied to the federal government, not to the states. So let me make that clear. They could do all of that. State-supported church, no problem. Paper money program, not a chance. To me, that says a lot about how the framers viewed your money.
Right.
A lot. At the convention, the framers did not lift a finger, write a word, or say a syllable in opposition to the religious powers that the states kept. Not a syllable. I just don't know how to make it more clear.
Right.
Just how important paper money was.
So unpack that just a little bit more for me. I know you made it very clear, but the fact is that they didn't want states printing money because it
was used as a welfare program. I mean,
I see.
Theoretically, that was the sole purpose. There was no other purpose. They were printing money for farmers who wanted to discharge their debts with worthless paper money. If the states had printed money responsibly, in other words, print it, let people accept it or not accept it, let it, maybe the creditor would have said, well, okay, instead of $12 in gold, I'll take $1,200 of paper money. If they'd have done that, I suspect there would be no problem.
Right.
But I have a contract with you. You owe me a gold coin. You bring me a piece of paper. I say, I don't want it. And the guy says, well, the legislator says you have to take it. So tough. Yeah, it's a welfare program. Plain and simple.
Right, because the paper could be worth a lot less valuable than a coin or whatever.
It was worth a lot less.
Yeah.
That was the entire point. It was worth a lot less.
Right, exactly. That's so good. Not good, but that's good to understand. So when they came to this conclusion and they started writing these parameters into our Constitution about paper money and about how does that play into like the Federal Reserve today, or how does that play into our modern context? Because it just seems like it's a system or it's stacked against us to a certain degree.
Well, that is a very thorny, tricky question, and it's been around since I guess the first U.S. bank under Andrew Jackson. The question remained, I forget the wording in the Constitution. They were careful about what the federal government could do, and I believe it said the federal government's allowed to coin and print money. I'm certain they said coin money. Right. I'm not sure if they said print. I'm pretty sure. You know what? I think they said no. The federal government can coin money. And so, yeah, there has been huge debate about that ever since. One of the biggest Supreme Court cases, the early ones, was on the first U.S. bank and Andrew Jackson. And, does the federal government have the authority to establish a bank? And it's a thorny question because it's one of those, it's like, does the U.S. Constitution, are you allowed to establish the rank of gunnery sergeant? Well, it says you can establish an army. I mean, how deep in the weeds do they actually? So It says you can finance this and you can finance that. Does it actually give you the right to establish a bank?
Right.
It's a thorny question.
I see.
It's unlike the paper money stuff. It's a thorny issue. But yeah, needless to say, almost from day one, the federal government has been granted the power to print money, to have a bank, to have a Federal Reserve, to have the Treasury system. All of that has been, under the umbrella of their rights, which, again, a thorny question. And I flip-flop on it, honestly, which not many constitutional questions do I do that on, but that's one of them.
Okay. What else about paper money that I should be asking, or should we move to the next topic?
No, I think paper money leads to an understanding of the checks and balances system. So let me ask you, if I were to ask you, we have the checks and balances,
right?
Tell me how that works. Tell me what you envision. What do you think that's all about?
Well, I would envision like a legislative system that's making the laws, the executive, branch which is executing the laws, and the judicial branch is enforcing the laws. And then that is kind of played out repeatedly on both the state, local levels in different, sometimes called commissioners, but it's the same kind of.
So who is checking who and who is balancing whom?
Well, I think that the idea was that the House on the state or federal level was closest to the people, and so they were supposed to be that big check and balance. I think it's been inverted. That the executive branch with executive order now somehow does.
Yeah, the House has weakened itself.
Exactly. So, then the judicial system is to make sure that, as complaints have arise, to reinforce the laws. That's how I'd see it, but I could be totally wrong.
Well, that's how most people see it this way. I mean, and you hit it basically. I mean, we picture a rogue senator and he gets a bill passed, but or he gets a bill. The rogue senator wants to screw the people, but the House is like, no. Or the president says no, or the judiciary, or a rogue president wants to screw the people, and the House says no. And these branches of government are checking each other.
Right.
That's what people think, because to keep our elected officials from screwing us over. This is 100% completely, absolutely false. On all level. And again, this is, I say that there are 5 things in my book that you can only find in my book. That's one of the 5. Checks and balances are entirely, and obviously I will back this up, they are entirely, almost entirely, 99%, created solely as a check on the will of the people. The framers, and I will quote here at least twice, the framers, your representative isn't going to go about screwing you because you will be voted out of office. The framers just, that's just the way it works. The problem with government is not that your rep is trying to screw you. The problem with government is this, and we saw it with paper money. The rep's not trying to screw you. You, the people, the constituent, want something you're not entitled to. And the danger comes from the rep trying to give it to you. That's the danger. We must stop representatives from giving to the people exactly what it is that they want, because too often the people want something that they're not entitled to. Someone else's money, for example. Here are 2 quotations to back that up. And by the way, in case I forget to say it, the framers had no trust whatsoever for the common man, democracy, majority rule, 0. They also had no trust whatsoever for aristocrats, the elite, the rich, none. Right. The reason they spend so much time talking about the common man and his failings is because under the U.S. Constitution, anti-majoritarian checks and balances aside, under the U.S. Constitution, the common man wields the lion's share of power. Therefore, the common man has to be checked and balanced and handcuffed and watched and understood. A lot of people get on the framers because they give so much grief to the common man. Well, that's because under the U.S. Constitution, the framers give the power to the common man. Here are 2 quotations. In our government, the real power lies in the majority of the community, the common man. And the invasion of private rights is chiefly to be apprehended not from acts of government contrary to the sense of its constituents, not from the government trying to screw you, but from acts in which the government is the mere instrument of the major number of constituents. In other words, what the majority wants. That was James Madison, another delegate, and Governor Morris. The check provided in the Senate was not meant as a check on legislative usurpations of power, in other words, the Senate doing something evil and corrupt, but on the abuse of lawful powers, on the propensity of the first branch. It is a check on the propensity of the first branch, the House, to run into projects of paper money and similar schemes. The Senate exists to check the House because the House is full of people who want someone else's money. A lot of people would also get this wrong. Well, the House also checks the Senate. That is wrong, because as Madison notes, you don't need any special tricks or gimmicks. You don't need checks and balances to check the Senate. If the Senate is viewed as the house of the elite, the aristocrat, the moneyed men, you don't need a check and balance on them for this simple reason, says James Madison. If a faction, your special interest group, consists of less than a majority, relief from oppression is supplied by the Republican principle. The Republican principle. There are 10 rich guys and 10,000 poor guys. You don't need any special checks on the wealthy. You don't. And we saw what happened in Rhode Island. Again, all their power and all their money were meaningless in the face of democracy. To check the aristocrats, the elite, the money men, the Republican principle. They'll never have the votes, unlike the House. Checks and balances exist solely to, and again, it just makes perfect sense. The framers knew that whoever has political power engages in oppression. Madison in Federalist 10 is so crystal clear on this. If you've got power, you're going to oppress those without. And that doesn't matter if the person in power is the oligarch, the demagogue, the aristocrat, the many, the few, the king, the royalty. If you've got power, you oppress those without. This oppression can and will take many forms.
Right.
But Madison said, if you're going to get oppressed 10 times on Tuesday, 1, 2, 3, and 4 is going to be taking your money, and 8, 9, and 10 is going to be taking your money. The oppression can take many forms, but the unequal distribution of property is the main cause of the cause of strife in society. The very reason we need government is the unequal distribution of property brought about by the unequal distribution of talents that produce property. Bill Gates is better at making money than I am. Okay. I'm not entitled to his cash. So the framers said, those in power oppress those without. The first thing they're going to do is take your money. Under the U.S. Constitution, the common man, the majority, the less well off, again, they're not poor, they have the power. Checks and balances, therefore, all of them, every syllable comes back to them. They are the ones who must be checked. If the framers had written a constitution that gave power to 10, philosopher kings sitting on Mount Washington, then the checks and balances would have been directed at them. I think I've never, other than the framers' words themselves, I don't know why. My entire book, I don't know why no one sees this. My entire book could be, if you do anything in life, anything at all, buy my book. But if that's a bridge too far, you must read Madison in Federalist 10. Everything that I just said is right there. Federalist 10. And by the way, Google right now, best of the Federalist Essays. There were 85 of them. Best of the Federalist Essays is going to be 10 every time. Most important of the Federalist Essays is going to be 10 every time. Best written, most important, most famous. Federalist 10. And by the way, Madison talks about in that essay, why do we have government? Well, we have government because men are at each other's throats. And they're at each other's throats over money. Madison cites, and then he speaks about how the Constitution will break and control the violence of faction, the violence of special interest groups. And he lists 7 different things that the government, the new government is going to prevent this. He lists 7 conflicts, 7 internal stripes, 7 problems to be fixed. Every single one of them was money, 100% totally focused on money. Not one of them said, and now those people who want to pressure free speech, they can't do it. Money, 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 money. And the last 3 specifically were not just money, were welfare programs. He mentions that our Constitution will prevent paper money, it will prevent the abolition of debt, and it'll stop levelers from having their way. Levelers are people who want society leveled in a financial aspect. Everybody has the same thing. Welfare, welfare, and welfare. Federalist. Everyone else who reads Federalist 10, it's incredible. I don't know why. God has smiled on me. I don't know why. Everyone else who reads Federalist 10 walks away hearing only one part. In an extended, large, diverse republic that we have in America, Madison wrote, this is a great thing for checking tyranny, because the people of Massachusetts are rarely going to want the same thing as the people of Virginia and Vermont. Very true, 100% true. That the very nature of the country helps prevent oppression. In the federal government, Maine can want X, Y, and Z all day long, every day. But if the people of Virginia don't want it, people of Vermont don't want it, people of Maryland don't, a very true sentiment. But that's all anybody ever gets from Federalist 10. They're missing the fact that it's all about money. And again, it's all about welfare. The last 3 of those 7 on the list are welfare programs.
Right. So it sounds like our founders, as you stated this time and last time, it's very important. Our property and what we create, what we steward, what we take care of. The whole concept of redistributing that or overtaxation to give it to someone else or whatever, anyone in the world or even in our own nation, is the main foundation for the Federalist number 10, right? Is that so? With that in mind, where are some of the areas of misalignment that you're seeing today?
Oh, today's situation?
Yeah. Today's application of the Constitution and Federalist 10.
Well, you said founders, and I know you didn't mean to. You said the framers. Remember we had that?
No, yeah. Where's our misalignment with today's view on the foundation of today's view?
No, I was kidding. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
I was on a side thing. No, well, obviously, I mean, I love easy questions, better than the Bank of America was. Well, clearly, the federal government is not meant to spend your money all day, every day on any single thing, everything imaginable. I mean, my wife said, don't use the Sri Lanka episode. Okay, how about Hillary Clinton and Chuck Schumer 100 years ago trying to build a museum to the glories of the Woodstock concert in New York? Okay. Think about, people are so used to the federal government spending all of their money on anything imaginable. They don't even, I think I talked on this last time, they'll call it stupid, ridiculous, outrageous. They'll laugh at it. I mean, nothing is more laughable than the Sri Lanka thing. Okay. $8 million to teach Sri Lankan journalists, my money. But they never, ever, ever call it what it is, a violation of your sacred God-given rights.
Right.
And that's what it is. And clearly the federal government, how in the name of God does a boy in Kansas farming away under the July sun, how is it that you tap him on the shoulder and say, Hillary and Chuck want to give some of your money to their friends in New York. Right. So fork it over or else. How in the name of God is that right? Explain that to me. I mean, it's bad enough if his own state legislature wants to take money from him for a museum that will be in Kansas. Okay. We won't go there. That's outside of this, what the farmers in the state, But, I mean, the federal government can, I don't know how more plain to say it. They can spend all of your money on any crazy crap that they dream up all day, every day. I mean, that's all they do all day long. The entire U.S. government system, another quotation from a writer who I wish I remember, is now a, quote, a free-for-all for what used to be private property. And it's a nightmare. And, historically, the country, the first 150 years, 160, whatever, outside of times of war, they spent, I think it was average 2% of GDP a year. Now we're at 25%. In 1 year, I forget how many years ago, recently, it was 32%.
Right.
32% versus 2%.
Now, you mentioned last time tariffs. Was that the primary income source for the federal government, or what? Explain that to me.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's just that simple. Direct taxation, and there's been a great deal of debate about what direct taxation means, was not allowed. The income tax, which is why you had to have a constitutional amendment to have an income tax. But yes, I think, I forget the number, but the majority of the revenue came from tariffs. Which,
why does it seem like so many people nowadays are like panicked about tariffs? Like they're just like,
well, tariffs are, because it's a new tax. If you start jacking that's just a new tax. But no, tariffs, despite what some people will say, tariffs are born mostly by the consumer. Mostly. A tax is a tax. Theoretically, the nation that sells us some goods could say, well, this tariff, that sales are going to drop. So, we'll throw some money in the kitty. We'll offset. But they're mostly borne by the consumer. And a tariff is don't get excited about tariffs. Get excited about taxes. They're all the same. Okay. A tariff will raise the cost of goods, and or there will simply be transactions that would have happened. I want to buy this. You want to sell me this. I'm happy. You're happy. Now those transactions just aren't going to happen. That's a tax too, even if no money changes hands. That is a very real tax. There was an opportunity for two people to be happy and for us both to get what we wanted, and now that's gone. But no, I mean, I'm definitely opposed to tariffs because it's just another tax. It's just another new tax, and it's not being offset by anything. Not that I can see. I don't see any massive. The federal government needs to, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, welfare. That's 60% of the budget right there. So let's start with that.
Right. Any closing remarks from today? And maybe lift up your book one more time. Tell people to buy it and get it. And
if you wanted to talk about, because as I say, you had a question about I get that a lot. How did the Bill of Rights come to the Constitution if the framers come to it?
Yeah.
If
let's go for it. Let's go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very, very fascinating tale, and it's just pure, ugly, raw politics. Very simply, we know why James Madison, father of the Constitution, was opposed to the Bill of Rights. Now, in Virginia, the Anti-Federalists, led by Patrick Henry, were very powerful, and they were opposed to the entire Constitution, period. They said, even if it does respect its bounds and its limits that you say it will, even if it does, it's too powerful to start with, okay? We don't like it at all. Now, in Virginia, the Anti-Federalists, again, are very powerful. So when the first elections come around under the U.S. Constitution, James Madison is a shoo-in to be a Virginia senator. I mean, his stature is just gigantic and huge. But who picks the senators under the U.S. Constitution at the time? The state legislature. The legislature. Who controls the state legislature? Patrick Henry and people who don't like James Madison. So guess who is not a U.S. senator in the first Congress? James Madison. He has to instead run for the lowly House seat, which he runs for and he gets. Now he's a member of the House. He's learned his lesson, though. He knows that his political career is over unless he can satisfy the Anti-Federalists. And this is where, wow, it's such a fascinating tale. So he says, okay, you want a Bill of Rights? I'll give you a Bill of Rights. Now, he has no interest in changing the Constitution that he just wrote and he is known as the father of, and he doesn't want a Bill of Rights. But did you notice, I said this a couple times already, every single thing in the Bill of Rights was already unconstitutional. So James Madison says, okay, I'll write you a Bill of Rights. I'm going to write you a Bill of Rights that changes nothing. One author called James Madison's Bill of Rights a sop to the unenlightened. It was designed to fool people. You want a Bill of Rights? I'll give you a Bill of Rights. It changed nothing. There was a book called From Parchment to Power that traces the history of the Bill of Rights. And in the foreword, the man notes that the Bill of Rights, carefully crafted to change not one single word of the original Constitution, ... carefully crafted to change not one word of the U.S. Constitution. It's not only is it a disaster, it's a joke. It changed nothing. The intent of the man who wrote it was to change nothing, which is why the most vociferous proponent of the Bill of Rights, Patrick Henry, once he saw what was in the Bill of Rights, or what was not in it, guess what? He refused absolutely to support it because he saw that it was a joke. It was a trick. He wanted it. He saw what was in it. He refused to support it. And that's how we ended up with the Bill of Rights. As they say, a sop to the unenlightened. Change nothing. Now, clearly, what a tragic irony. It's just ironic all the way around. Henry wanted a Bill of Rights because he was afraid of the federal government. Madison gives him a sort of Bill of Rights, and it turned, by itself, the federal government into the all-powerful, all-consuming Leviathan monster that we have today. I find that incredibly ironic. It took a while. It didn't happen overnight. But again, every one of our legislators, every being on planet Earth says, can the federal government take my money and send it to Sri Lanka? They look at the Bill of Rights and they say, doesn't say they can't do it. It must be legal. That's what the Bill of Rights has done to us. Or as I call it, the Bill of Very Few Rights.
Right. And again, just to reemphasize, you believe we have far more God-given rights than the Bill of Rights, and that's the whole issue with the Bill of Rights, right?
Yeah. I don't want anybody to hear me wrong. Thank you, because you can't say it enough, please. I mean, thank you. The framers believed in every single one of the rights listed in the Bill of Rights, and they believed in them passionately, as do I. But boy, we got a lot more than that. Right. And one of those rights is that I don't send my money to New York for a Woodstock concert, and I don't send it to Sri Lanka, and I don't send it to the federal government to tell me what kind of light bulbs I can have or what kind of toilet I'm allowed to have, and on and on and on and on.
Right. Wow, what a fascinating story. It's amazing when you start uncovering history of what the truth that it just speaks into us, and some of the things that we're ignorant of. We didn't, not thinking of wow, this really does limit our rights instead of this gives us our rights. It's like the starting point and the angle or the perspective that we're looking at a particular subject. What a powerful truth. Any closing remarks as we jump off for today? And I thank you for this time in our Constitution and just knowing a little bit more history.
Oh, no, I have to thank you. I think I told you this before. It's been a very, very long journey here. And Pastor Brian, I will never, ever forget you for this, because outside of my friends and family, you are the very first human being ever to show an interest and to give me a platform of any kind. So I want to thank you.
Well, we're honored to have you on, and thank you. And in your next book, or if you happen to write another one, let us know. We'd love to bring you on again. Or if it's something else you wanted to highlight later down the road, let us know that as well.
Maybe there will be a constitutional subject that comes up, and real quick, like the other day, I heard one of my favorite podcaster talking about the old. See, it cuts both ways. The old obscenity thing. The Department of Justice and what is obscene and pornography and blah blah, and my favorite podcaster, she says, yeah, that's what they wanted, the founders, when they wrote the Bill of Rights. I think she meant framers. We went over that.
Yeah.
And that's what they wanted. They were defending this horrible, terrible stuff. And I see she got that wrong. Here is the lowdown. All you need to know about obscenity and pornography, et cetera, is it applies to the federal government. Remember, the states can tell you what you are allowed to drink, for the love of God, for moral and religious purposes. The states had been writing their own obscenity and decency laws for well over 100 years.
Right.
I guarantee you nobody in any state in the union sat around saying, you know what, this new federal government, I hope they come in here and I hope they take some of my money to hire DOJ attorneys. And those DOJ attorneys are going to study obscenity and get back to us and tell us what our state laws should be. No, absolutely not. Nobody in any one of the states believed they needed the help of the federal government to determine their obscenity laws. So the question is the federal government allowed to regulate obscenity? No, period. I challenge you, go look at the enumeration, and if you can find that power, correct me and get back to me. But this context, my point in that story is this context answers so much of what comes up today is constitutional, unconstitutional, legal, illegal. If you've got the right context, if you've got the right background, and the same thing with the Second Amendment, by the way, the Second Amendment, clearly, I'm sorry if I'm taking too much time, clearly, remember, the Bill of Rights is written to appease those people who were most distrustful of the federal government, who disliked it and distrusted it more than anybody else. Do we honestly believe that the people would have ratified a Bill of Rights that would allow this new federal government that they do not trust to come in and put them in prison for owning any gun they wanted at any time they wanted and any number they wanted? There's no possible way on planet Earth you can believe that. It's just, again, if you know the context, you can answer a lot of questions.
That's good. Well, thank you, Rick, for coming on and just sharing your knowledge and your talent with us and this research that you've done. We truly do appreciate it. And like we like to say around here, go out there and defend and advance biblical values in the public square. God bless.
You love our beautiful state, but does fighting for issues that most affect families ever feel like you're climbing alone? It can feel like an uphill climb in a hostile environment that champions causes detrimental to Washington families. Again and again, the summit feels out of reach, but you don't have to climb alone. With like-minded people fighting for Washington families by your side, the journey becomes not just possible, but powerful. The Defender app, brought to you by the Family Policy Institute of Washington, connects you with your team for the climb ahead. Connect with conservatives who care about issues affecting families in your specific county and across our state in order to make our voices be heard locally and in Olympia. Simply click Learn to stay informed about the latest news affecting families. With one click, press Huddle to team up with other conservative minds in your specific county who care about how these issues affect you in your unique community. Then simply press Activate to get involved and to make your voice heard on legislation that matters in Olympia. With the Washington Defender app, you won't face the fight alone. Together, we can make a difference for families in Washington. Download the Washington Defender app today A simple way to let your voice be heard